Hello and welcome to Procrastination Station. Procrastination as in procrastinating and that other thing that we all do. If you can put it together, then you're my people, and if you can't, perhaps click that next button. No shade. I'm your host, Hannah, and I'm here to talk about self-sabotage in a way that invites all parts of us to come along for the journey. I'm here to lay out the setbacks and superpowers of self-sabotage in order to manage our limitations. Throughout the show, we'll discuss designing a life that works in your favor through sustainable creative practices. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you enjoyed today's topic. Hey, it's Editing Hannah here. Our guest today, Amanda, has such a rich story, and in order to do it justice, we did a nearly 3-hour interview, my longest to date. I've cut this interview into 2 parts for a more digestible listening experience. This is part 1 of 2, so make sure you check out the second part of Amanda's story where we talk more about neurodivergence and the career side of things. That episode is linked in the description. Hello and welcome. I have something so special for you today. I'm actually so excited for this interview. I have Amanda Graham here. We are going to be talking about so many things. Amanda has such an amazing, fantastic story that I'm really looking forward to diving into with you guys today. Some main points that really, really stood out to me that I think will grab your attention as well is the fact that when she was a teenager, she escaped a apocalyptic cult. Like, holy cow, it's like a movie, I swear to goodness. And she's also done some really amazing, notable things since then, such as working in TV production, being an ex-comedian, and then also these days she is selling a new book that's a self-development book for those who are on the verge of losing their shit, and so much more that I think she would probably do a lot more justice if she explains herself. So we don't have a usual guiding topic today. However, I did just really, really want to talk to Amanda about all of these things. So maybe a theme will come about after we start talking. Otherwise, I would just really love to get into it. And thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Amanda. And let's get going. Hi,
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. I'm excited, Hannah.
I'm so excited too. Thank you so much for being here. I really, really am excited. I've been telling my dad, my friends, guys, this is so exciting.
You know it's serious when you tell your dad, man. It's the same for me.
Exactly. And he's just he was actually really excited for me too. So I'm looking forward to this. Thank you for being here. Now, I would really love to, just before we get started, a little icebreaker. If you can take some time to introduce your career, your current projects, what does your day-to-day look like, that kind of vibe.
Okay, my career and my day-to-day vibe. Okay, my career, I like to do things the hard way. That's that's the that's the overriding theme in my career. I quit my PhD. I was doing a PhD in medieval mystic sexuality, as you do. And it's a very long story, so niche. But the point is this: I didn't want to quit, but I had to, and I didn't know what to do afterwards. And the only thing I really am obsessed with, besides the monkeys, but they don't have a lot of jobs, is TV. I love TV so much. I'm obsessed with television, and I have been ever since I was a little girl. So I was just like, oh, I'll just get a job in TV. I'll just do that. And so I bought a book, called How to Get a Job in TV. And I followed the book because formulas, right? For me, as an autistic person, formulas are. So I did that, and that's how I got started. And so I started off in factual. It's so odd because my first interview was with a comedy company, and I thought, oh, this can't be this easy. You know what I mean? This is amazing. But they looked at what I had researched and kind of my background, and they're like, we think you'd be better in factual, not comedy. So they helped me set up a meeting with the BBC, and they took me on in documentaries and religious and ethics documentaries, and kind of historical ones and stuff too. And that was really fun. But I really wanted to write comedy. I was just obsessed with it. And so in the BBC, they told me to basically become a stand-up comedian, run comedy nights and stuff. So again, formula, I did. And that's when I got my break in writing. Comedy writing was somebody saw a gig of mine and then told their executive producer about it. And so then the next thing I knew, the executive producer got in touch and said, send me your best 5 jokes. So I did. And then I was in a writer's room, and then I learned kind of as I was doing it. Then the work dried up, and then the pandemic happened and the industry collapsed. So I kind of was forced to do a lot of different things. I was kind of teaching at the university. I developed a networking session that I run, and I was doing marketing because I had done loads of copywriting and stuff for the websites and TV websites and stuff. So it was, and because I researched so much, so it was a natural segue. So I did that too. And then once everything kind of after the pandemic, I was able to kind of go back into TV and film, doing script editing and ghost writing. And I do a lot of like polishing scripts and making them funny. It's called punching up. So yeah, and it's basically just a career of a lot of different of millions of different little things.
That's fantastic. There's so many things that you said that just made me like, "Oh, this is great." One thing in particular, learning the hard way, I feel like we could get into that a little bit later in the episode because same, my mom loves to tell me when I was growing up, I loved to do things the hard way, and, like, it's it's a whole thing. Let's get into that a little bit later. Something else that I wanted to just highlight, how annoying is it, and how often does this happen when you talk about being in comedy? People are like, "Tell me a joke."
Oh my God, it happens all the
I
time.
bet.
All the time, and it's like, it's very difficult because the problem is when you're telling jokes or whatever, is that you need to be around an audience that's, like, there for the jokes, right? So, like,
Yes.
if you're doing it in front of an audience that actually isn't there for the jokes, like, they're at the pub, and then you happen to get on stage and they're like, or they need to be so they're not receptive. I think when people
Yeah.
ask that, they're trying to zing you.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? I mean, like, I wouldn't
I
ask
do.
you if you're, like, an office manager, I'm not gonna be like, "Well, file something." You know what I mean? Like, I what a weird thing to ask, like, or a surgeon, "Well, prove it to me," like, "Operate on me, give me an open heart surgery right
Right?
here now," like, it's
"You're a surgeon? Take out my appendix." Like,
who does that?
but honestly, I feel like doctors get that too, where it's like, "Can you look at this weird mole?" Like,
Yeah, my dad, he's a doctor, yeah, definitely.
it's so funny and so weird. I also just, like, I am pretty obsessed with comedy as well. I mean, I'm not a comedian or anything, but I really love watching stand-up comedies, and something that I really, in particular, am drawn to is the formula of comedy, the setup,
Oh,
the like, you can feel it's like it's about to get funny, and then when they actually land that joke, it's just it's such a practice and storytelling, and I find comedians, that's the biggest stand-up comedians in particular, that's their biggest attribute that they all share, is they're excellent storytellers, and I think, like, when you can make that story funny, in addition to just telling the
oh,
story,
yeah.
that's a real talent. I think that it's really admirable, and it's something that, I mean, especially with the pandemic, even though the industry collapsed a little bit, we need more laughter.
Oh god, yeah.
Especially we'll be talking about maybe some heavier things.
Yeah.
We need laughter. Laughter is medicine. Laughter is how we get through darker times.
Mhm.
Especially, you can't change what's happened to you in the past if you've experienced trauma, anything like that. You need to laugh. That's the best way to get through it.
100%. I mean, comedy is like it's like a prism for me. It's kind of how I see everything. And one of my biggest problems is that I joke. I don't know if it's like a defense mechanism or like a coping mechanism, but I can be in a very serious situation. And the first thing that comes out of my damn mouth is a joke. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it's horrible, but it's a default. So I really have to stop myself and go, wait, is this an appropriate time to turn this into something? But that's just kind of how I try and make people feel better.
Yeah, I 100% see where that's coming from, and, like,
Mhm.
I can respect that some audiences, they're not, as we said, they're not necessarily primed to hear a joke, but I don't think that it's horrible to do that because we all need to cope. Like,
Mhm.
coping
Yeah,
mechanisms, defense mechanisms, that's not a bad thing if it's protecting your heart and protecting your peace.
that's a
Um,
very good point. That I love that.
yeah, it's okay to have some, coping mechanisms. Now, I would really love to actually get into a little bit, like, the experience with the escaping apocalyptic cult.
Okay.
It's just so cool. I know it's not cool
Oh,
with the
is it?
trauma, but I'm just like,
I
this
mean, it
is
was cool that we escaped.
yes,
That was
yes,
cool.
definitely
But
that. I don't wanna make
that
light
church
of this
sucked.
situation because it's a serious thing. It's
Yeah.
trauma, and I'm so glad that you're here, that you escaped, that the apocalypse didn't come, and all of these things, like, I don't wanna make light of that, but I would really love if you could just talk about that a little bit. I find it so interesting.
I do make light of it, just so you know. Like
Cool.
one of my favorite scripts is about my time in it, and there's been enough time where I can see the not just the funny side of it, but like the insanely absurd side of it, and I don't mind leaning into it anymore. But it was really terrifying, and I need to clarify though, it wasn't like we were walking around in robes, you know what I mean, and living on a commune or something like that. This was something that was like a lot of churches in America that's hidden in plain sight. It was fundamentalist. It was dispensationalist, which means it's a kind of thing of the rapture will happen, then the tribulation will happen, then this will happen, and blah blah blah. It was all planned out. And the pastor was an absolute lunatic. I'm a lunatic, and we used to do things like there was a clear gender divide. I mean, we weren't even really technically were we allowed to even touch boys? I mean, we had to, like, even just to sit next to your friends, they would put a Bible in between you to make sure that there was distance so that your bodies wouldn't even brush up against each other. But they would do things like, and I was only 12, I think, when we started there. It might have been 13. But like the boys would be outside playing sports and, I don't know, polishing their guns for hunting or whatever. And we would be inside with baby baby dolls learning how to breastfeed at 12 and 13 years old and stuff. And
That's twisted.
and it's wild because, now I did drink the Kool-Aid for a while. I need to say that, okay? I was not Miss, right on and resistance from the beginning. There was probably a year where I just went all in. But
Yeah.
there were things about, and I think that that's because the way he is one of those hellfire and damnation booming preachers that had his fingers in all the pies, like he controlled everything that was done in the church. Nobody was allowed to say anything bad. We had to just accept the doctrine. Like we weren't allowed to read newspapers or watch TV or do anything sinful. We weren't allowed to listen to secular music. And even Christian music had to be like, no drums, no this, no that. It was an exceptionally cold climate, and we weren't allowed to wear pants even to sled or ice skate or anything. So we would be in culottes and leg warmers, and it would be like 20 degrees below zero. You know what I mean? Like wind chill. It was horrific. And
Yeah.
what was really terrifying was the teachings and being a child, as well. It was they didn't just teach that you could go to hell for sin. They would teach that you wouldn't even know when you were sinning sometimes. So it was just this constant state of
Fear.
beyond fear. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Because it was like I don't know what to do if I don't know that. Like what happened? My brain just started going. This isn't good. You you understand what it's like to be under authoritarian rule because on my mother's side of the family that's the way that things are. So that felt very natural and normal to me, but that doesn't mean that my nervous system was like good with what was going on. And
Mhm.
they would blame women and girls for tempting them. All that stuff was happening, and meanwhile we're getting ready for the rapture, and then we're getting it was bananas, and then everything changed. And I can't tell all of the story because some of these bits of the story are not mine to tell because it involves sexual assault and rape and stuff. But what I will say is there were probably 6 women. There were probably a lot more, but maybe 6 that I know about. And I was not part of that, but I was being groomed. So he had a method where he would require women to go into counseling if he didn't like their attitude or if they were, they didn't have partners, like they were divorced or whatever. And then he would prey on them there.
Yeah.
And this had been going on for a while. And then I can't say who, again, because it's not my story to tell, but somebody told the deacons, which, who are the underlings for the church, and they went right to him and told him.
Oh no.
So this person who was the whistleblower got death threats and whatever, and then it basically just branched out and spread to some of us who were like, wait a minute, like what? So basically, what happened was he was threatening our lives, and we didn't know. And then everything blew up because he left a threatening letter in the mailbox. And so the whistleblower went to the deacon board and didn't go to the police. Well, went to the deacon board, was like, now do you believe what I'm saying? You know what I mean? And so and so this spectacularly blew up. And then at church, this I will never, you know how like you sometimes remember every pin sharp detail of little scenes in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
I now at this point I still didn't know what had been happening, and I had been in counseling with him against my will. But there were 6 women. We have what's like called an altar call. So after the sermon, which was always like an hour and a half long or whatever, people would go up to the front and pray at the pulpit, you know, and it was a way of like, if God was really convicting you that there was sin, like you would go up there and pray and whatever. And sometimes people would like take you into a back room to help you or whatever. But what happened that night was 6 women went up to the front of the church. He was not there. His family was there. His wife was there. His wife's mother was there. And the 6 women just confessed their sin, that they had sinned against God and sinned against the pastor. And I remember the pastor's wife's mom screaming at them with that, like a shaking voice, how much I remember saying, I have so much bitterness toward these women. And like I said, he wasn't even there. So basically what happened was we had to go into hiding. We hid on a farm for, I don't know, it was about 3 days until everything blew over. And I honestly, I think it was, I don't know what happened to make him leave. Because usually what happens is he stays, and then the people who cause the trouble are the people who leave. But it caused a massive split. Oh, sorry, I completely forgot. Before we went into the farm, before we went into hiding, we were a couple of the women and families who we all trusted each other. We were all in one particular house. We'll just say the S's house, right? I'm not going to say their last names, and he came to the door with a gun. And we were upstairs. The house had 3 floors, and it was like a semi-detached. So there was a house next door. And the S's didn't have any money. Nobody in the cult had any money. Nobody had any money, because we weren't allowed to be in the world and have proper jobs and whatever else. So they didn't have a phone. So he was at I remember we were in the top level, the kids playing and dicking around and whatever. And so we could look out the window and see where he was, and we could hear him because he was shouting. He was shouting for them to come to the door. And he's got the gun. We could see it. He's got the gun in his hand. And I remember he had this parka on, a really lame parka. He had terrible sense of style. It was almost like a separate insult. And I remember he had a toque on, but it was flipped backwards, like not on all the way. And so Mr. S was saying, you have to go, Pastor, like you have to go. We're not letting you in. And all this was going back and forth. And Mrs. S came up the stairs to where we were, and they didn't have a phone, so they couldn't call the cops. So what we had to do was we had to quietly, so that he couldn't hear us through the windows, we had to quietly pound on the wall, hoping that she would hear us next door. And Mrs. S was saying, well, sometimes you can hear their TV on and stuff. So, like we know we can hear each other. So, and they ended up calling the police. But the last thing I remember is when Mr. S had told him, this standoff happened for a while because it took us ages for us to like, call the cops right now, call the cops. And it was fucking terrifying. And then the last thing I remember is Mr. S was like, the police are on their way. And I remember him walking down the street with the parka and the toque with a gun in his hand, and he just left. And then that's when we went into the hiding for a couple of days. And then I didn't see him again until about, I don't know, a year or two later. I was at my school was having, 'cause Christian school, my school's church was having a big like summer fest or something, and he was there. I hadn't seen him, and they asked, and because there's like 1,000 people there or something, and the pastor asked all the pastors stand up and introduce yourselves, and he stood up, and he was just right out, like probably 30 feet away, and
I'm chilling.
we were completely unprepared. You know what I mean? Yeah, that was my apocalyptic cult escape thing.
That's nuts.
Yeah,
First question. So when the 6 women, they were standing up
yeah.
confessing their sins, what's the sin they were confessing coming forward?
No, the sin that they were confessing was having affairs with the pastor and leading him astray.
Right,
But
naturally.
that's not what was happening, because it came out afterwards that he had been blackmailing the women, saying he was going to kill their children or
Yeah.
them or whatever else, if they
I'm gonna
robbed
pretend
their
like my blood
children.
is not boiling. Like,
I know,
that's so terrible.
I know, I
Um,
know. It's diabolical.
Very
He still
diabolical.
has a church. He still has a church.
Oh, that was my next question is, like, what happened to him? I
He
hope
must be like 95.
yeah. I hope to all that is good, that he had some sort of come to Jesus moment and something turned around in his brain and he can just, like, be
No.
within the church and not lead people astray, like,
No, he's still preaching the exact, I mean, I would assume he
I
hasn't changed
I
in
would
that way, because he's still preaching the exact same stuff. He
yeah.
has a very authoritarian setup, he controls everything in the church. The way that the church acts with him is the same way that the people in the church acted with him. And also, like, his sermons are the same. It's so odd because I listened to them when I was writing my script about my time in the church, a comedy, alps. I
Ops.
listened to his sermons. I hadn't heard
Yeah.
his voice in, well, since the 80s. So, which was odd, right? Like, it was so odd to have that neurological
Mhm. It's
response, that
visceral.
shaking and whatever else, but it
Yeah.
put me exactly where I need. I know I don't recommend people do this, creatives. I don't recommend, I'm not a professional. I can't tell you to do that, but it really did put me in the place that I needed to be to remember things and get them out. So,
Yeah, it's just the way that you said that, like so I actually, when I was around 22, had this moment in my life where there's things that have happened throughout my life that just flashed before my eyes. It was like
ooh,
a scene in the movies where your life flashes before your eyes, and it was like I was terrified. I had a mental breakdown in front of probably, like, 400 people, like, I was sobbing, people were consoling me, I was so embarrassed, and, like, I'm not a crier, like, I don't cry even in front of people that I know and love, let alone a group of strangers, but I was at this when I started my business, I was under the impression that this was a networking event, but it was actually, like, a self-development, buy my course kind of event. So I
oh,
was under a different impression going in, and so they were just, like, talking about all these, like, like, "The problems you see in your life can be solved, and we can help you solve them, and it's all perspective," and they just gave all of these just, like, self-development-y things. And
okay.
because I was not primed to hear all of these things, I was on a very, like, curious, like, "What are they saying to me right now?" sort of wavelength. If I know what I'm getting into, I'm usually a lot more skeptical. I'm usually a lot more like,
Yep, I'm feeling you.
yeah,
Totally.
like, "What are you preaching to me? What are you selling to me?" But because I wasn't primed, I had none of that skepticism,
Mm,
I was just interested, and because of this, I was also primed to receive just all the information they were sharing, and I had these memories from when I was a child that I had just forgotten. I had completely suppressed. I'm not gonna go into detail of what those memories were, but I just completely suppressed these memories, and it was honestly, like, in the moment, absolutely terrible.
mm,
Moving after that, it made me realize a lot of things within my life that I was doing some behaviors that I had that did not align with my heart, that were just completely different than how I want to be as a person,
yep.
and then I was able to rebuild from basically the ground up, and I'm really grateful for that time in my life now, but at the time, it was also absolutely bone-chilling, terrible, awful, would not recommend, but it
Wow.
also brought me to where I am today, so it's one of those things that, it's a terrible thing to go through, but
Mhm.
and that's in reference specifically to, like, listening to sermons as an adult, like, physically, I'm removed from the situation, physically, I'm safe, but neurologically, emotionally, spiritually, I am not safe, but it's also the ability to work through those feelings.
Yeah.
Um, Something else that you mentioned that really struck a chord with me was the pastor telling you, like, sometimes you can sin when you don't even know that you're sinning, and what that sort of brought up in my head was, like, after this moment for me of, going through these movie moment life flashback things, like, afterwards, and even still today, a lot of the time I'm sitting here wondering, like, what if there's still more memories? What if things
Mhm.
aren't finished bubbling up and I'm just gonna come across this memory and it's gonna shake my life up again?
Yeah.
And that's not the exact same thing as, what if I'm sinning and I don't know, but it did remind me of that experience, and it was just like like, I don't know how to explain it other than just, um, it's also one of those things of, like, I've already been through it. I'm
Yeah.
safe now physically, so I can mentally, emotionally, and spiritually go through the same thing that I went through when I was 22, and because
Mhm.
I've already been through that, I'm coming back stronger. So, like, I do try to remind myself and affirm to myself that, like, even if there are things that I don't remember that want to bubble up as I age, like, I can handle it. I've already handled it, and I can handle it moving
100%.
forward.
You survived when it happened. Do you know what I
Exactly.
mean? So
Exactly.
it's yeah.
And it
And they probably will come up,
yeah.
take it from someone who's in their 50s, like, that shit does come up, and, you don't realize it's like a cavity or a near cavity, and you don't realize how impacted the stuff is, you know what I
Mm.
mean? And then it's almost like you get over a certain level of the things that happen to you, and that clears away one level of scar tissue, and then you
Yeah.
don't realize that there's another one, but it's further down. So then it doesn't tell you it's there until you're like in the most inconvenient, inopportune
Yeah.
time. Do you know what I mean? When you
No
definitely are
kidding.
not supposed to be able to cry or whatever else,
No
like
kidding.
a wedding or a graduation or
Yeah.
whatever else. Yeah, of course.
Absolutely, absolutely, and something else that came from all of this was I was able to reinvent my support system, and
I
now I have a
love
support.
that. I love
Yes, and now I have a support system that actually, truly, and deeply supports me that, I'm just so beyond grateful for and happy for, and it really is just, life-changing, and so now I
that.
also know if these things happen to come up again, I have this support system that I didn't necessarily have before. So, like, it's also I'm prepared now, and I'm more prepared than I was to be able to work
Mhm.
through any of these things that might come up. Something else that came to mind while you were sharing your that part of your story was, well, first of all, I remember growing up, like, I grew up Christian, not in a apocalyptic cult, however, I remember, like, when I was a teenager and starting to date, my mom would always say, "Save room for Jesus," and that reminded me of the Bibles.
Yeah.
Gotta save room for Jesus.
I'm getting flashbacks now. That's
Is
hilarious.
that something that would be said to you?
I didn't date.
Right.
I didn't know my I the few boys who were interested in me, um, were scared off.
Yeah. Save the
Uh,
room for
you
Jesus,
know,
probably.
yeah, like even the Christian boys like in my school and stuff were like, "Nah, it's too much. Nope." So,
Yeah,
no, I didn't date till I was at university.
right on.
Mm.
I feel like that's also totally respectable. Something else that you mentioned as well is, like, you were transparent about how when you were in the church, you started off being drinking the Kool-Aid, Jim
Yep,
Jones reference,
yep.
like, being indoctrinated into his whole shtick, if you will.
This whole shtick. Yeah, that's a good word.
So, I wanted to mention that, like, So the timeline of things, you said that you entered this church when you were like 12 or
Like
13.
12, 13, yeah, it might have been the end of being 12. I was in 7th grade.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right on. And so and even those who are older, like, when you're in church and you have somebody who has this voice, this booming, authoritative, knows what they're talking about voice, and you also have all of these other people around you who are, drinking the Kool-Aid, and also your parents, like, people who are supposed to trust and who guide you through everything. All of these people who are believing what is being said, including the person who's saying it,
Mm.
it's very rare to have that Katniss Everdeen, like, fight in the rebellion, lead the
Yeah,
rebellion, like,
yeah.
most of the time you just go with the flow until something happens where it's like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, this is too far,"
Mm.
such as the death threats and such, like, most of the time we don't have these we have to escape feelings until
Yeah.
something is, put in front of us where it's like, "Okay, this is actually too much for me." And I just wanted to say that, like, it's okay that you drank the Kool-Aid for a while. I would
No.
imagine nothing different, to be
I
honest.
just don't, yeah, I don't wanna come across as someone who, was always, just like, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? And just, like, all super Wonder Woman about it, I and, it's important for us to realize, that fear is an incredibly powerful emotion,
absolutely.
and I wouldn't have drunk the Kool-Aid if I didn't believe in the fear that hell caused. And also, a disclaimer, my dad was not part of that, like, my dad was not part of that, so
Right on.
yeah, it was just my mom. So just not my dad. It was my mom. So, but yeah, it's that's why I freak out when I see what is going on around us and how easy it is to make
Mm,
people to create a story that inspires fear, that
absolutely.
makes people do what you want them to do.
Absolutely, I can also imagine that you're maybe and I can relate to this too, not the type of person who loves being told what to do.
I I hate being told. Well,
Yeah,
no. No, 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 no. I love rules if there's a reason for them,
right, right.
and if they're applied to everybody, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
if they're a just and they're applied to everybody, absolutely.
yes,
No problem at all with them.
I'm
But
the
no,
same.
I don't like being told what to do.
I
No.
am the same, and like, if it's, let's say, something as simple as, like, doing the dishes, and it's like, "Why are you doing the dishes that way when I do it this way?" And it's like, we get the same end result. Don't tell me what to do, I'm never actually gonna try your
Yes.
way, even if it might be better.
Yeah,
And I
exactly. I
feel
just
like
yeah. You
that
know what it's like, right? Life is so
yeah,
short. Why are you picking a fight with me about how I wash the dishes? Just get over it.
exactly, and I feel like, especially in your case, that
Mhm.
probably comes from and honestly, even in my case too, like, being younger, trusting those who are adults around you who are supposed to be leading you the right path, and then finding out later that it was like, "Oh, they did not lead me down the right path, and I gave them control, and I was misled." And, it makes total sense to grow into that archetype as an adult to be like,
Mhm.
no, do not tell me what to do unless you have a clear and just reason." And I also think that makes a badass adult to be able to question things where you would not lead your own kids into the same path of
Oh god.
that style of leadership, obviously, right?
100%. And you know what's the most frustrating thing, is because, those of us who had abusive childhoods, a lot of abusers come from abusive childhoods, right?
For sure.
But and that is the way it is. My mother certainly came from a diabolically bad, like, horrific family,
Yeah.
horrific. I don't believe in, beating about the bush, because the whole reason that abuse is allowed to continue is because people are like protecting family secrets, and I hate that shit.
Yeah.
Sorry. I hate all that. But I what was frustrating for me when I became a mother was it was the easiest decision. It wasn't even a decision in the
Yeah.
world, you know what I mean, to not abuse my kid. Like, it was just like, I never had to sit there, and I'm not saying I'm a better person. I'm only saying in my own experience, I never had to sit there, even if I was frustrated or whatever, and go, okay, don't hit your child. Don't hit your child.
Yeah.
It was just like, dude, why would I hit my child? Why? That's insane. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I think that was my frustration, was for me, becoming a parent, for me, it was the easiest thing in the world to not abuse. And so to be someone who went through that as a child, and somebody didn't make that choice or decision for me, that was what I came like. That's what I had such a hard time dealing with, and I think breaking away from the church and starting to kind of go no to the whole thing wasn't just because I didn't like being told what to do. It was because I was like, I cannot end up like you. I cannot
Yeah.
end up like you guys,
Yeah.
because you're okay with treating kids like shit. You're okay with beating us. You preach about it all the time. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't, yeah, I couldn't do
Yeah.
it.
I think that's honestly so valuable for you to say because I know many people who want to become parents who do come from an abusive background,
Mm.
they fear becoming a parent for that exact reason of the
Yeah.
patterns could repeat. I don't wanna do that to my kids. I don't wanna be that person. And I think even just acknowledging those feelings and acknowledging that you want a life that looks differently, that's, like, huge because you
Yeah.
know that there's a different way, so you're just naturally going to gravitate towards doing it a different way than how you're brought up. And
Yeah.
especially too, I think it's valuable to say that, like, everybody fucks up their kids. Every single person, no
Oh,
matter
well,
if you're perfect,
they fuck you up, your mom and dad. They don't mean to, but they do. Of course, you
even
know
if
what I
you're
mean?
perfect.
I will have my own ways that I send my beautiful, lovely son to therapy at some point or another for
Mhm.
being scatterbrained or not fixing the faucet for 6 months, or all of the other kind of stuff that I do.
Yeah.
I've got stuff.
Yeah.
It's just it's different
You don't
than
hit
abusing
them
me.
for not doing it. It's that's I think that's really valuable, is, like, as
Yeah,
long as your kid is fed, they're housed, they're clothed, and
yeah,
they have a semblance of love around them,
yeah.
that's all that you can do. Like, that's literally the only thing that you can do, and then the rest just unfolds as it has to.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
you can obviously learn, you should be learning as when you become a parent, you should be learning about parental strategies, and you should be
yeah,
learning about what it's like to have a toddler and what it's like to function with no sleep for 7 months, and you have to, and that all that does suck. It's hard,
I believe it.
and you do feel like you're going to lose your mind, no doubt. And I definitely believe that those of us who want children but are a little bit worried about the abusive past or whatever, it's also really important not to put pressure on your child to be the savior, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, and whatever. You can allow that to happen naturally. Like, I
Mhm.
I found that just parenting my kid in the way that I really desperately wanted to be parented was so healing for me.
Yeah,
But that is not his job as a child to heal me, you know what I
for
mean?
sure.
It is my job to sort through the problems, do the opposite of a lot of what happened, and then it's just a gorgeous bonus that
Yeah.
you're healing the little you, you know?
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I also like, I wanna mention too, something that my mom says. I've been bringing her up a lot today. I need to
I
tell
love
her when
that.
this is over. Something that my mom says quite often is that there's no opposite to the feeling of shame. That shame is a
Mhm.
useless emotion because there's no direct opposite. If you're guilty, you can seek forgiveness.
Yeah,
If you're angry, you can seek release or happiness. If you're sad, you can seek happiness and peace. Like, there's an opposite to almost every single emotion except for shame. And that's something that you've also brought up too, of people perpetuating this cycle of abuse because, "Oh, that's shameful. I can't talk about this abusive
yeah, yeah,
abuse," or
totally.
like, protect the people, protect the stories, etc. And I just I wanted to highlight that because that's something that my mom says, and I think it is very, very true. Obviously, it's not 100% true in every circumstance. If you are doing something that is truly wrong, I also think a little dose of shame is okay if that's gonna get you on the right track. You can let things go and move forward, and it's like, I'm ashamed of the way I used to act, and now I'm acting differently so I can let it go. But
Yeah.
I think when it's a seed within you that stays within you, that's when it's massively unproductive. And yeah, I just wanted to highlight that.
I love that, and you know what? You're right. I do think like a little bit of social shaming can be very effective, but I sound like a little evil, like, "Ooh, I need social shaming," but it's more like that. the whole point, like if we do something bad, right? Like like bad, not naughty, but like we do something to hurt someone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, there's a difference between going, oh my God, what I did is really bad, versus I am a bad person. And
Yes.
that's what real shame is, right? And that's why it's so easy to weaponize it. Because if people make you feel like you are inherently a bad person, first of all, it takes away your agency. Because if you think you're a bad person, then you don't think you can change. You don't think you can change who you are, and you give away that agency, right?
Absolutely.
And yeah, there's no impetus for change. There's no impetus for change if you really do genuinely believe you are inherently a bad person.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
That'll
why it's really important, like, for us, when I raised my son, even if he was being very naughty, I would never say he was a naughty boy. I would say, "You're doing something naughty." Do you
yeah.
know what I mean? There's a big difference between you're a bad boy and doing,
You
"Why
made a
would
bad
you do something
choice.
like that? You made a bad choice." Yeah.
Yeah.
"Why did you do that? That was a bad choice," or "That's something that would end up hurting you or hurting someone else," or whatever else. So, and that really made a difference, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very insightful. I do so we have 3 subtopics that we're gonna get into. Believe it or not, it's been almost an hour and we're still in the intro section.
Oh, crap.
I told you this was gonna be a long conversation, but I'm here for it. It's absolutely okay. Um, so we have the subtopics of neurodivergence,
Yes.
spirituality, and understanding. I would
Yes.
actually like to start with spirituality and
Okay.
then neurodivergence, then understanding. Um, so my first question under this subtopic of spirituality is what does your relationship with religion and spirituality look like now as an adult?
Ooh. It's really weird. So real quick, the top line of my relationship with Christianity is, I did my grad work in the Bible,
Mhm.
and mysticism and whatever else. I am still obsessed with the Bible. I still watch loads of, churchy Christian documentaries. I go to cathedrals all the time in churches. Like, I'm obsessed with relics. Like, so that part, I love it. It probably because I don't feel like I don't, because I've really truly gotten over that fear of hell.
Right,
I don't have any stake in it. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of freedom to play with the Bible and theology and stuff when you don't feel like you're going to go to hell if you do it. So that's fun. But I am a spiritual person. I wasn't for a long time, but I had a bit of a not come to Jesus, but come to the universe moment.
mhm.
It started with this. I was on a Stephen Hawking TV show, and it's a very long story, but
Did
basically,
you meet Stephen Hawking?
I did not meet him, but it was his show, and basically what the thing was, it was for PBS, and it was Think Like a Genius, right? And so they
Right,
had all these different each episode had three people and a big philosophical question. And so he designed the scientific experiment so that you would have an aha moment at the end. And so I was in the episode called What Are We? And I think what he wanted us to come to the aha moment about was like that, like how intricate life is, and how essentially it was an accident. You know what I mean? Just because it's so intricate, like what needed to happen for for the universe to happen and we humans to evolve and all that kind of stuff. That's a great point. That is not the point that I left there with. What I got with was, because we had to go into experiments that showed like what we were made of and how we functioned. And for me, that was like, it's not just that we're stardust. Like, we are literally made up of the beginning of time. We are
mhm.
literally made up of the birth of the universe. And all of us are. And I can't think of a better gift than that, because growing up in the type of Christianity I did, we were so removed from creation and God and how God moved, and we were not glorified as humans, but we were called worms. We were called dust, the lowest of the low. We were called all that, and this felt like the total opposite of that. This felt like something. Yes, it's a series of random coincidences. Yes, it's millions of years of evolution, but how what is it like that literally our cells are made up of the birth of the universe? Like, that is so awe-inspiring to me. And
Yeah.
then that started a very weird kind of journey that has ended up with me, I'm a granola crunching hippie,
Ditto.
meditating, pseudo Buddhist, spiritual person. I practice gratitude.
Mhm.
I try to be a good person. I try and put love out in the world. Um, and that's where I am. But I do feel like I can, you know what it's like when you're like high vibe and you're just really feeling it, and you just almost vibrate like with how good stuff feels, or
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
especially in meditation. Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's
I
sensory heaven.
Yeah, I also wonder, and I don't have facts behind this, but I wonder if being neurodivergent as well can increase that experience of that vibration of positive light, love, energy.
That's a
Um,
good question.
yeah, because I feel bad things very, very deeply. So
Yeah,
then I also feel good things very, very deeply, and
that's
that's part of
a
the
great point.
superpower.
That is such a good point. But how do you feel about meditation? Because like it was really hard for me. It took a while to get over because my brain never shuts up, right? It's just blah
Yeah,
blah blah all the time.
yeah.
So what I had to do was like think of numbers. I had to see them in my head in an animated way and go like 5, 6, 7 while I was breathing to
Mhm.
just stop the constant narration that's going on. But then once I got over that and was able to really focus on breathing and stuff from a sensory point of view, it was absolutely amazing. Like,
I love that.
yeah.
The way that I practice meditation myself is I usually need something in my hands.
Yes. What
So,
do you use?
honestly, anything. If I can find a reason to meditate, I will. I have actually talked about this on the show in previous times. I'm gonna talk about it again, but I'll find a link as well if you wanna talk about actually, my episode is called Meditation for Busy People.
Oh,
So any listeners, if you're interested, definitely check that out. But so if I'm driving somewhere familiar where I know the route, I
yep.
will meditate while I'm behind the wheel.
I love that.
If I'm going somewhere I don't know, then I definitely can't because I have to be thinking about where I'm going. Or if I'm doing the dishes, I meditate on the feeling of things in my hands, the feeling of the soap, the smells, the not the icky, goopy stuff that happens, but definitely the nice feelings of doing the dishes, as well as like painting or crocheting or anything where I'm used to the motion and I don't have to think about it too much.
I love that. Yeah, okay, that makes
And
sense.
yeah, and then just, like,
Mhm.
focusing on the sensory experience can help shut down that mind chatter that I
Mhm.
also experience, like, 100% of the time. But I'm also similar to you in a sense that I love numbers. If I'm out for a walk, I'll be counting my steps. If I'm crocheting, I'm counting stitches, like, so many things. Um where I just really love to find numbers as well, like, I'm one of those people who believes in, like, 1111 and all of this
Yeah,
bullcrap.
I love all that. If I look at the clock and it says 11:12, I'm like, "Ah!"
I know. But I always pay attention, not necessarily to say that 1111 is magical, it's gonna change my life, but it's more so what am I experiencing at this moment,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
lining it
yeah.
up to those numbers to be like, "I was just thinking about something so magical and so beautiful that I want in my life, and it's 1111." That's something special. But I think that's really wonderful that you've been able to, first of all, have enough distance from the experience that you had. I'm sure many people would either stay indoctrinated,
Yeah,
one extreme, or the other extreme of just like, "No, it's all bullshit. I hate it. I can't go
yeah.
back there." Like, and just going the other extreme of never ever having any type of relationship with spirituality or religion
Mhm.
of any sort.
Yeah.
Um,
Which is understandable, by the way. I
yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
100%. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you know what? To a degree, I think both extremes are understandable. If you've been indoctrinated for your whole life, it's a big thing to leave what brings you comfort and leave what you've been taught up until, your whole life. So I also think that it's quite magical that you were able to escape and experience the way that life is in so many different lenses beyond the lens that you were brought up in. I think that's something to be celebrated. Now, next question here would be, what are some things that you leaned on when you realized that your life needed changing? So you did mention that you abandoned the idea of the church for a while, and also, like, working through this fear of going to hell and everything like that,
Yeah.
like, what were some things that replaced those ideas while you were in the midst of changing your life?
So, this okay. I would
It's a big
assume
question if you
no,
wanna
no,
take a
just
moment.
it's just that my life has changed so many times, but in
Absolutely.
terms of the last decade, in terms of this wilderness period I've been in, I think first it was Jack Daniels,
Right on.
and that happens every once in a while. I'll have a wild time for like a couple weeks, and then I go, "No, no, no, no," I just like stop, and then, I don't for like months, but
Mm,
I do cyclical that is a sensory thing. I love the feeling of Jack Daniels, I love the feeling of it all the way down, I'm using that excuse, I'm sticking with it and whatever else. So I would say that, and then I did this is so funny, this is so cheesy, and this is alright, I'm gonna admit it. Okay, one of the things that I did first this is so cheesy, right? One of the things I did first when I realized that I really did have to change things, but I didn't know where to begin. I felt so disoriented and whatever else, and so I had started my gratitude practice and everything, and started as a baby meditator, right? I because you have to understand every part of my life sucked. Like when there's no every part sucks. So I started watching those cheesy motivational videos on YouTube
yeah.
that have all the quotes and there's somebody running really hard, and then it's like you are this and you are that and I am the greatest and you are a god and like all this stuff, and I would just watch them all the time because I was like, at least I mean, I'm listening, right? I'm
Mm,
listening. I'm not gonna pretend I wasn't paying attention to them. I wasn't just like, in an ironic way, laughing at it.
yeah.
No, I was paying attention, but and I was listening to the quotes and everything, but it was just so absurd. I was like, I am 43 or 44, and my life has gotten to the point where I have to watch cheesy motivational videos to just get through the day. It's so wonderful. But that really, really helped,
Yeah.
and that's when I started picking up little bits of information that really my brain absorbed that. It must have desperately needed affirmations, you know what I mean? Words of affirmation that I wasn't used to hearing,
Mhm.
because I had no frame of reference for that. So, and I can think of times to this day where I'm like, that was right,
Yeah.
that was right, So, that was a big thing. Um, being very much more selective about the people I was around.
Mm.
And I kind of when I realized at the beginning of that period, that everything was so messed up and my life was gonna require a complete reset, I kind of made peace with the fact that I didn't know how long it was gonna take, and I was gonna be open with what happened, and that doesn't mean that I didn't every once in a while get really mad when I was like, "Okay, this is year 5, this is year 7, this is year 10, how long is this gonna take?" But, I kind of, on some level, made peace with the fact that this was not a regular journey. This was not a
Mm.
regular, "I haven't seen anyone for 6 months, oh my god, my life's a mess." This was going to be a gnarly unpacking.
Yeah, for sure. That's beautiful, and thank you for your candidness about some healthier mechanisms and some maybe quote unquote less healthy mechanisms.
Yeah.
Now, some things that came to mind while you were talking about that is, first of all, the cheesy motivational messages. To me, that makes absolute, total, and complete sense.
Does it? Tell me why.
So growing up, you were hearing sermons
Yeah,
of "You're worms, we're the scum of
yeah,
the earth as humans," except for me, the pastor, because 'cause I'm great. Well, first of all, I wanna mention that in the Bible, like, we're not worms in the Bible. God has us as his favorites, and then his angels are here to serve us, and it's like, no, that's just completely inaccurate in terms of the religion. However, I digress. The cheesy motivational quotes and stuff like that, it's like a sermon. So it's delivered in a format that your brain is wired to understand, but it's the opposite message of
Mm,
you're a goddess and you're, the creator of your own universe, and it's like, these really beautiful messages that are just completely opposite to what it was that you were hearing, and sort of similar to what I brought up earlier of, like, there's no opposite to shame specifically,
Mhm.
but there is opposite to pretty much every other emotion. So you're experiencing all of these deep and probably not labelable emotions from being at that church and then listening to these other sermons, like, sorry, quote unquote sermons of motivational speeches and quotes and stuff like that. It's a format that your brain also just understands.
That's so odd. I never made that connection before, Hannah. I
I love
never
that.
made that connection before.
I love
No.
that, and I think, first of all, it makes sense, and I also think that it's a really beautiful mechanism because same, like, I haven't had the same experiences within the church, but I did grow up religious, and I also really love those videos, and it's not necessarily to say that I'm like, "These are so, like" I don't know, I recognize that they're cheesy, I recognize that it's maybe a little bit lame, but it's also a format that I understand, and it's something that can help me shake myself out of a funk.
Yes. Now, I'm interested, did you discover them by accident, or did somebody tell you about them, or, like, what how did that happen?
100% by accident. Actually, I
That's
remember
wild.
the first one that I heard where I was just like, "Okay," is it was actually talking about, like, love and relationships, where it was, like, basically this little motivational thing was talking about the message was being the type of person that you want to date.
Mm.
And I
Right.
was like, "That's just, like, so freaking true." But then they delivered it in this format of just like, "You can be everything, and you're so blah, 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 blah," like the cheesy format, and it actually delivered the message to me, and I was like, "Huh." And so, of course, like, I found it on social media, so, of course, when you spend more than 5 seconds watching something on social media, your algorithm is flooded with
Yeah,
more.
totally, 100%, yeah.
And so that's just kinda how it happened. I spent a little bit long on a advertisement, and then all of a sudden my feed was flooded, and it's like, I do think that there is a lot of power and beauty in using this as a tool. I
Yeah,
also think that there's balance
yeah.
to it, where
You're
it
right,
can
you're
almost
right.
lead you down a hole of basically the same level of indoctrination as being in the cult, just to an opposite extreme, where it's almost like a toxic positivity vibes of ignoring reality and not taking action and, like, just all of these things, you know what I'm saying? So I think that it is something to be consumed mindfully.
100%. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, you don't want just the dopamine hit off listening to it and then not doing the "now what? Now how can
Yeah,
I translate this?" So I'm not being told those thoughts, but my brain thinks these thoughts myself.
exactly,
That comes from
exactly.
action, right? So it doesn't come from just listening to it.
Exactly, exactly, and also it's, like, a matter of reframing your subconscious because a happy
Yes,
subconscious makes happy subconscious decisions, and so, those decisions are what's key, like, actually leading your life in a direction that you want it to go in, but it's never ever a bad thing to condition your subconscious to be happier and safer.
oh god,
Um
yeah. Yeah.
Now, my next question here is, do you ever have experiences that are like a window into a past life that almost feel like a slippery slope into your old self? And if so, how do you redirect yourself?
It was so funny, because I tried to think of what I would include. I will first of all include a very funny thing, which is that, because we were what was called rapture ready in the cult church, in all the churches I went to essentially, but in that one especially, every time, because we were obviously taught that the rapture would happen, we would hear a whole like a trumpet first, right? And so I remember all of us at some point or another, we have this joke, ex fundies and ex, evangelicals, whatever, that like every time you hear a trumpet with no context, like you really think you're gonna get like you're like, oh my god, am I gonna get left behind? It's the funniest thing that pops in your head. Have thought about Helen forever and whatever. And where was I? Was I outside of school? This was a long time ago. This is probably about like 15 years ago. And somebody was practicing trumpet and I didn't know. And so I just started and I heard the trumpet and I just froze up and I was just like, oh my God, is this a rapture? Oh my God, am I going to be left behind? It just came out of nowhere. It was the weirdest, honest thing. So that's a funny thing. And it is something I always bond with evangelicals about. We always talk about the trumpet moments and whatever else. It's very funny.
So funny. That is
It's
very funny.
so funny. Did you have it? Did you believe in the rapture or anything? Or
No.
no?
I
Okay,
I mean, I'm
that's
not
good. That's
sure
good.
I'm not sure if the church that I went to preached about it and I was just
Oh,
too
believe
young
me,
to
you
absorb it.
know, you
Yeah.
know.
I think we stopped going to church when I was less than 10 when we
Mhm.
stopped going,
Yeah,
so but that being said, I also didn't go to any, like, um I didn't go to children's church.
yeah.
I resented being a child, and so I always
God, I
stayed with
love
people.
that. I love that. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
But
My
it's so
brain
funny.
immediately goes to this needs to be a sketch, so I continue.
Right? It's so funny because, like, I did resent being a child, but now I'm so, like I like being playful, and I'm almost, like, childish for being an adult, and it's like,
100%.
I just flipped. Life is too short to be all stuffy, but whatever. Um, I went to one of those churches that was more like it was very centered around music. There were, like,
Oh,
these
that's
sermons.
cool.
Yeah, it actually was, and it's like, in those movies where you see people and they're, like, just, clapping along, doing like, dances and
You're
preaching.
allowed to clap and everything? Oh, that's
I
very
know, it actually
cool.
you know what? It actually was. I don't 100% agree with all of
Yeah,
the methods and methodologies that were being preached, however, the vibes were vibing. They were
okay.
definitely it was a
I
fun
love that.
time. Um,
Mhm.
people would speak in tongues, people would dance, people would
Oh my
clap, like,
god, that's so
singing.
cool.
I
See,
really think the fun part of church.
a spirit-led church, right? I was always jealous of that. We were not allowed, like, they were going straight to hell according to my pastor. Do you know what I mean? So straight to hell.
Right.
And that was the devil who was doing that, you know. So, but I looked at that with longing, you know what I mean? Like, I want action and fun. Oh my God, we had the most boring church services for somebody
Yeah.
screaming at us for like an hour and a half. Anyway, sorry, I
"You're
digress.
gonna get raptured," and
Yeah,
all
it just
that's
so that trumpet is still there, but in non-funny examples, like and I don't know if you can. I think neurodivergence can relate to this, but like I do slip back into this thing of doing everything myself, like doing everything myself and thinking that the best solution is working harder and working longer, right?
Mhm.
And I forget that the best things that have happened to me have happened when I've reacted to things or there's been a synchronicity where I've met someone who was kind of what I like what they were looking for was the same thing of what I was looking for. Like all my partnerships, all my collaborations have been results of like happy accidents or right place, right time. And when I work my ass off in a formulaic way, not to meet a deadline, but like, okay, so I'm here and I need to get here. So I have to do these 15 things to do that. You know what I mean? And I
I
go into
do.
hyper focus mode and I don't stop and I burn myself out. And I know you know about that, you know,
I do.
because of your bold the reason I found you because your bold journey article, right? But
I'll link that in the description too.
yeah, it's good. You should read it. It's amazing. Anyways,
Thank you.
but you know, and so I find myself in a almost constant state of burnout. And I really try and fight that. But until I get to a place where I feel like there's more security, you know, I'm still in an industry that's absolutely screwed. And, you know, like until I'm in a place where I feel more secure, then I will loosen the reins. But
Mm.
I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to get out of that with all this instability around. That's number one. And then number two is forgetting. Sometimes I forget. Sometimes I get so worked up and I won't meditate for like you know a couple days or whatever, and I'll just be, I haven't got the time, you know what I mean? And which is stupid because I know it's going to make me feel amazing, like, and I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But I will do that, and then somehow, in the same way that if I create a spreadsheet, I forget about it 3 days later, right? Even if I need it, I will forget about. I will forget about the fact that I do I have a gratitude practice. I will just completely forget I have ever done it. And then I'll just be like, "Why am I being so negative? What's hot?" You know, like it'll be
Yeah.
weeks later, and I'll be like, "I don't understand. Why is everything so screwed? Like, why am I so mad? Why am I so triggered by everything?" I'm like, "Oh my god, it's because I haven't focused on anything good." And I don't mean that in a toxic positivity kind of way, but
Mhm.
what I mean is, it's only when we focus on the things that we have and are grateful for the things that we have that we really do realize we have it so much better. That we have it so much better. You know what I mean? Than we think we do. And it's only when you kind of realize that you're relaxed enough for your eyes to be open for all of the other things that are coming your way. You know, if you're only
Yeah.
focused on what you haven't got, you're not looking up at what's around you. So, and you can feel bitter and you can feel all kinds of stuff, you know, it doesn't help. It doesn't help. So yeah, those are the two, sorry. The other thing is, but this is a good thing, because I think sometimes we need to allow old things to persist. And the other thing is, I am a big believer in delusion and being
Me too.
because you need to. You do, because
Mhm.
this world is so difficult to negotiate. It is so difficult, like, especially for us as neurodivergents, right, to get
Yeah.
through. When you're going after your dreams, and you're trying to do stuff, and you're going after your loves and all that, you have got to be delusional about the fact that you can get somewhere. And delusion is like this thread that has run through every aspect of my life, no
Yeah.
matter how old or young I am. So, but I will allow that, because Delulu is the Salulu.
I love that so
That's not
much.
my saying, I just use it all the time because it's so good.
That's hilarious, and I honestly I think that that's also okay. I have another question here, but I think that we sort of covered it. Was, what is your experience with exploring nostalgia in a healthy way? And just from what I've gathered from what you've shared up until this point is that you still allow these certain things that may have brought you comfort when you were in a severely uncomfortable situation, specifically in the cult, but in a way that's just painted with your own brush instead of with somebody else's negative brush, such as like still appreciating the Bible and also cathedrals and these religious symbols and things like that. And then also the delusion, because I imagine like the cult that was delusional. Like we can be real here. And allowing that to continue throughout your life, but in a way that can be productive rather than destructive.
100%. I love that, and I think what's really important with nostalgia, because I'm autistic. Of course, I'm nostalgic. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like, I'm obsessed with everything that I've been obsessed with since the '70s. Like, it's
yeah,
ridiculous.
me too.
So,
Not from the
nostalgia
70s,
is
but
important, right? Because we feel a certain sense of safety
mhm,
in there are safe songs, our safe TV shows, all that
yeah,
stuff, right? Like, love it, love it, love it. But I think the key is not is not to get trapped in nostalgia where that's the only buzz you get, right? That's the
mhm,
only. We have to kind of constantly be searching for new ways of safety, and it's here's the perfect example of what I mean. You know, when you get together with your old high school friends, there will always be people, or just people in your high school, maybe they weren't your friends, but there will always be people who haven't moved on. You know what I mean? And they're
mhm,
like living that nostalgia thing, and they haven't experienced any growth, they haven't challenged themselves, they haven't tried new things, gone to see the world, done whatever. And I think that's the perfect like example of a nostalgia trap, right? Like, we have to be able to like go, oh my god, I'm gonna watch Empire Strikes Back for like the 3,000th time.
yeah,
And that's cool because I love it and because Hoth rocks and everything else. But you know, I remember what life was like when that came out, and look at how far I've come. And wow, did I ever think I was going to end up here? You know, not, oh, I'm going to watch this movie again, and God, the good old days. They weren't good old days. They weren't good old days. You're just remembering them wrong. You know what I mean? So, like, just
yeah,
don't get in the nostalgia trap. That's all I'm going to say about
yeah. I also love how you highlighted at the end there, like, they're not the good old days, you're just remembering them wrong. I do think that it's very common to look back at your past with rose-colored glasses and, having your own personal context that is different than the reality, and then also acknowledging that, but not shaming yourself for that either, just allowing yourself to dip your toes into that nostalgia and then
that.
move on and live in the present and aim your eyes towards the future while also having your feet planted in the present,
Yeah.
but not stopping yourself either from just, like,
Yeah.
reaching back a little bit, like,
Of course not. And it's
it's
fine.
okay. It is totally fine, especially if it brings you comfort.
100%. Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't you? Sometimes you got to watch Bugs Bunny cartoons, and that is the way it is. You know, that's fine. That's cool.
Yeah,
So,
I love that, and I love cartoons as well.
another crap.
Something that I
I
I
love.
actually I wanted to bring up that you brought up in our pre-conversation is that one of your safe films is, oh, what was it?
Fantasia?
No, 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 the cult one.
Which one? There's a sorry, no, no, no. I
Oh my
won't know
goodness,
which
why is it eluding me?
one.
Summer something?
What?
Summer something?
Oh, the Ari Aster one. Oh my God, now I've forgotten what it's called. I've seen it 50 times. The one with
I
Flores. Ah, this is what I can't even remember what I call it.
Midsummer!
It's called what is it?
Midsummer,
That's the
Midsummer.
one. Yes, yeah. I
So
was going
funny.
to say it's autistic dementia is what I call it, but then I forgot the term autistic.
Oh my goodness, I love that I'm talking to a kindred spirit here. That's
Oh my
first
God.
of all hilarious that
Yeah,
we both forgot it,
Midsummer. Yes.
but I also just think it's so hilarious that some of your nostalgia movies and shows are, like, culty, and it's like,
Yeah.
I feel like somebody who has not experienced what you've experienced would be like, "Wouldn't you want to be 100% removed and, not be in this cult-like vibe?" But I think that it's also very healthy to allow yourself to explore these realities that you
Oh
did
yeah.
experience in a way where you're physically safe,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
still allowing yourself to explore that version of nostalgia in a healthier way.
100%. It's like exposure therapy, you know what I mean? For
Yeah,
people who have like real fears. But I understand why people, some of my friends, who kind of grew up in the same thing, want nothing, like nothing to do with it. So
yeah.
I get that. That's probably the more rational response than my my messed up past.
I think it's okay though, like, I truly, truly do, and maybe
Yeah.
that's a touch of the neurospiciness, that guides that, but truthfully, I think that it's okay as long as it's done with your feet still planted in the present.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here with me, and if you enjoyed today's topic, now is a great moment to subscribe. If you have any feedback about today's topic, please reach out to my social channels. I help creative entrepreneurs market their creations in a way that feels authentic. I also sell content creation templates to help you manage your social media with unlimited content creation ideas. And I also offer one-on-one marketing consulting services. Check out my socials and my website to learn more. If you're interested in working with me, please reach out via email. So that's social media if you're reaching out for my podcast, and email if you're reaching out for business. All relevant contact links are in the description, and thanks again for listening. Cheers for now. That was pretty good.